Alright, so it's been quite a while since I've done a proper analysis video, and with the, I guess you would still call it, recent reveal that Rose was in fact Pink Diamond, this is the prime time to do one, to really go back and analyze how this reveal changes things within the narrative of the show. There's no need for you guys to worry. This isn't going to be another hit piece on Rose. It is instead going to be an as objective as possible look at exactly what it says on the tin, how the reveal recontextualizes stuff from the Gem Civil War. Make note of that part 1 in the title too, because there are going to be more of these. I don't know if I'll do them back to back, week to week, or if I'll put other videos in between them. There's really no way to know. After all, there is a Steven Bomb next week, which may inspire me to talk about something that I hadn't planned to originally. But because this is a multi-part series, I want you to keep in mind that some stuff I talk about here may be elaborated on in later parts. For example, Rose's motivations for starting the war. I don't think that the reason we had already been given that she cared about humanity is entirely untrue, even though her behavior towards humans at this point in time seems more callous than we once thought it was, especially now that we know that she was behind the human zoo. I still think that a big reason for the start of the war was that she cared about humanity and wanted to save them, but I will be elaborating upon my reasoning for thinking that in my next video on this topic, a video covering the human zoo and how the reveal recontextualizes it. In the meantime, I'd like to talk about the fact that we know that, at least in part, her reason for rebelling was because she thought that a rebellion would serve to get Blue Diamond and Yellow Diamond on board with her canceling the colonization of Earth. This is likely also why she chose to rebel as a Rose Quartz instead of just rebelling as Pink Diamond, because originally her plan was not to live on Earth. Her plan was not to break away from Homeworld. Her hope was that she could save humanity, that she could save the Earth and then go back to her life as Pink Diamond. If she had rebelled as Pink Diamond, that would have become impossible immediately. But by rebelling under the guise of a regular quartz gem, she preserved the reputation of Pink Diamond and kept that as a possibility, at least until at some point later in the war she finally decided that she didn't want to do that anymore. And because at that point she had so many gems following her who hated Pink Diamond, rather than just reveal her true identity, she killed off her Pink Diamond persona in order to maintain her disguise. This all makes sense looking at things from the perspective that Rose wasn't acting entirely rational when she put all of these plans together. That she was, at least in part, letting her emotions get the best of her and control her actions. That she was still, even at the start of the war, unsure of exactly how she wanted things to turn out. This also means that because Rose wasn't just a regular quartz, I think, frankly, her followers have every right to be upset with her. Sure, we know that at the beginning of the rebellion it was just her and Pearl doing the rebelling, with perhaps Bismuth working in the background providing swords for Pearl. That it wasn't until later that she started to bring other gems into her cause. So at the very least, at the very beginning, she wasn't manipulating people, but she definitely did later. Once she realized that a small rebellion wouldn't be enough to convince Blue and Yellow to let her stop, that a small rebellion wouldn't be enough to convince them to support her in her efforts to end colonization, it's clear that she chose to escalate things rather than try a different approach. And in order to escalate things, she had to bring other gems around to her cause and build an army. This means that because of a deception, because she needed to maintain a deception, she in turn deceived more people, bringing them into a situation in which they eventually got killed, or at least many of them eventually got killed. The rest of them, at least the vast majority of the rest of them, eventually being corrupted into monsters, living horrors that are only shadows of their former selves. I mean, yes, it's true that Rose had good intentions. Yes, it's true that even if she had been just a Rose Quartz, she still, in order to accomplish her plans, would have had to bring other gems to her cause. But the fact that we now know that Rose was Pink Diamond all along adds another layer to that. It adds another layer to that deception, and I think she honestly comes off a lot worse for it. Not to mention that from a narrative standpoint, turning her from a common, oppressed quartz soldier to a diamond, a gem who just by nature is able to do pretty much whatever she wants, also calls into question as to whether or not Rose had other options. The assumption up to this point had always been that Rose didn't have any other option but to rebel the way she did, and now we can't be sure that that's true anymore. No longer is Rose the commoner who convinced her fellow common gems to fight for their rights, and through struggle and sheer determination became a figure that even the diamonds feared. Now she just comes off as one diamond making a power play against the others. One high-class member of society making a power play against other high-class members of society, and allowing the less fortunate to be trampled under her feet. But I think, honestly, the largest recontextualization that this reveal causes is that Rose wasn't a brilliant strategist, like we've been told. I mean, yeah, you could argue that she still was, but I, at this point, would have trouble buying that. I would argue with you that if Rose were a brilliant strategist, she would have foreseen that her faux rebellion might not be enough to convince Blue and Yellow to side with her. And I would argue further that if she were a brilliant strategist, she would be able to put her emotions aside and make cold, calculated decisions for the greater good of her cause. That she would have realized that her plan to kill off her Pink Diamond persona would not, in fact, have caused Blue and Yellow to call off the war as she predicted. And again, this is something else that I'll be talking about in the follow-up video to this, the one about the zoo. I would argue, if she were a brilliant strategist, she should have been able to foresee some of the missteps that she ended up making during this rebellion. Even if she wasn't able to foresee how those missteps would mess up her plans, I would have expected her to, at the very least, be able to foresee the possibility of her plans being screwed up. And again, I'll talk about this more in that zoo video. I just don't see any evidence that that was the case. What seems much more likely at this point is that any military success that Rose had came from the fact that she was a diamond. And so in the first half of the war, when she was acting as both Rose and Pink Diamond, she was quite literally forming strategies to counter herself, and therefore would have known exactly what to do, exactly how to go about that. And then in the second half of the war, after Pink Diamond was quote-unquote dead, she still would have had her inside knowledge of how Blue and Yellow operated to help her make military decisions. But because she wasn't actively working against herself anymore, she wasn't actively planning against herself anymore, that might explain how in the second half of the war, Blue and Yellow Diamond were able to start killing her crystal gems more often enough to use their pieces to create the cluster. Which brings us to the topic of the cluster itself, which I'm not saving for its own video in this series because I really only have one thing to say about it, and it was developed during wartime. Where before this reveal and before the recontextualizations that came because of it, Rose was indirectly responsible for the creation of the cluster because she started the war that eventually led to its development, revealing Rose to be Pink Diamond and showing us that scene where she chose to kill herself, quote-unquote, makes her much more directly responsible for its creation. Let me explain. I think we can all agree at this point that Rose made the choice to kill off her Pink Diamond persona because she let her emotions get the best of her and convinced herself that Blue and Yellow Diamond wouldn't care enough about her death to continue this fight after she was dead. It wasn't a logical decision. In fact, it was pretty much exactly the opposite. Rose knew Blue and Yellow better than probably anyone else in existence. And yet, because she reacted emotionally, because she convinced herself that they didn't care about her, something that she should have known was untrue, she made a terrible choice, which ended up angering them to the point that they created the cluster in the first place. Contrast that to Rose as just a rose quartz, someone who couldn't have possibly known Blue and Yellow Diamond in any sort of personal way. If Rose had been just a regular quartz and had actually killed Pink Diamond, this would have been a much more understandable mistake for her to make, because she wouldn't have been expected to know how upset Blue and Yellow would get. This means that because Rose let her emotions get the best of her, she made a colossal mistake, one which we can infer led directly to Yellow Diamond's great hatred of the Earth and her desire to destroy it completely, hence her desire to create the cluster. In either scenario, the original scenario or this recontextualized one, I don't blame Rose for the cluster's creation, but she is more directly responsible for it now than she was before. And that covers pretty much everything, at least everything that I can think of regarding what this reveal recontextualizes regarding the time of the war. There's still the zoo, which I already said I'll be talking about in a future video, but frankly we don't know if the zoo was created before or after the war started. And the beta kindergarten, which, believe it or not, I actually have enough to talk about regarding that one that I am making an entire video about that. Which brings us to the end of this video. As per usual, I'd like to know, what did you guys think of anything that I said here? Do you have anything to add to this video? Anything that I may have forgotten or anything that I may not have talked about yet? Maybe you want to call me out for talking about the reveal again so soon after I said that I wouldn't for a while, which honestly would be a valid criticism. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22 and I will talk to you guys later.